Hi everyone, so welcome back to this second interview with Kathleen Fridriksson. I'm really looking forward to it. I guess it's really important that if you're just coming to this for the first time, it might be worth your while checking out the first one because there's a lot of context there for what we're going to be talking about today. So I would highly recommend you do that first. But anyway, if you did watch the first one, I'm sure you're excited as I am to hear what we're going to talk about now. What we know about Kathleen is that she's consistently got out of her comfort zones. She's used the tools and techniques and just lived an amazing life. But wait to hear what she's done, the next part of this. So Kathleen, welcome back. It's just a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for joining us again.
Oh no, it's a pleasure to be here, Jack. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, fantastic. Really great. So Kathleen, one of the biggest things you've done, there's quite a few obviously, but one of the biggest things you've done, stepping out your comfort zone, is what we're about to talk about, because you took the risk to trust yourself to become an author. Do you want to tell us a wee bit about that? I mean, maybe for people who are just coming in, when did you first do MindStore? When did it become part of your life? I mean, not so much when, but how many years ago? You've done a lot of courses, and then let's find out how, over that process of time, you started to develop the idea of wanting to be an author and then going for it.
Sure. So my first interaction with you was in 1998, so that's 26 years ago, Jack.
My goodness.
So I've seen you speak live. I've attended 5 of your courses in person, 2 online, and I've also bought both your books. So I'm a bit of a MindStore
enthusiast.
If that lets you know enthusiast. Yeah, there you go. That's a better word.
Absolutely.
So yeah. Mm-hmm.
So amazing. So how did the whole idea? I mean, quite a lot of people come in MindStore courses and then they go off and write books, and I'd be very fortunate that quite a few first editions signed and all that stuff. But how did it come into your consciousness? Where along the journey did it come into your consciousness? Was it even before you did MindStore? How did that begin to happen?
Right. Okay. So as a young girl, I've been an avid reader. I lived in the libraries. And it was my dream to write a book. I remember writing one when I was 12 and taking it to the local librarian. And she was really kind. I don't know where that is. So it was in my head. I was really good at English, and I could have done English at uni, but I didn't think I was good enough, even though I got an A band 1. And I went on to study history. So still in my head, I had to do a proper job, not be a writer, or an artist or whatever else that people think. So, so I then went on to my career and had a lovely, varied career. And then it was actually my father. It was his dream to write and publish a book. But working class steelman, he wrote down stories on paper, but he didn't know how to make them happen. And I remember one day I said to him, I said, "I'll write a book, Dad." And he was like, "Well, you kid." He called me kid. "Well, you kid." I said, "I'll write a book." And he was dead pleased. So I'd made that promise to him that I was going to write a book. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2003. And then for the next sort of 15, 16 years, I had this thing not hanging over me, but this promise, the unfulfilled promise to my dad that I hadn't written a book. And I certainly hadn't published one. So then I was like, right, I need to publish this book, but I'm so busy, Jack. I'm so busy, in my career and family and traveling and all the rest of it. I'm so busy. And then it got to the stage where in 2019, I was so fed up listening to myself talking about I'm going to write a book and not actually doing anything about it, that I then called into force the MindStore techniques. So I'd be coming to your courses in 2018 and in 2019. And at all of those courses, I was setting the intention to write the book.
Yes.
2019, I finally went around all my old boxes and suitcases and gathered all the pieces of paper and notebooks. And when I put it all together, I realised that for all those years, I'd been trying to write the same book, even though I was in Iceland when I got a story, I was in America, I was wherever I was. And that's quite powerful. So towards the end of that year, I then made the time. So when am I free? Personally, for me, because of my family and my work commitments, I work full time. I got up at 4 a.m. And I worked till about 6 in the morning, had the shower, got dressed, went to work, came back, dinner with the family, put my wee boy to bed. Then I would go to bed up at 4 in the morning. And I did that for 4 months solid.
Wow.
Because I was so determined to write the book. And that was the first 70,000 words, the first draft.
Amazing.
It ended up 100,000 words. It was a very illuminating and involved process where I was just learning as I went along.
Yeah.
And within that, obviously, I was using MindStore because, I've set my goal, I've set my intention to write a book. How am I going to make it happen?
Yeah.
So then it's about the visualization. It's about going into my media room, talking to my coaches, looking at my screens.
Yeah.
Amazing. What's the right next step? What's the right next step? Because I had nobody to hold my hand. I self-learned it. I did courses and I read books. I was on YouTube, and I had a goal.
Yeah.
So that's basically how I started to write the book.
That's amazing. I mean, I'm interested in quite a few parts of this because I suppose both you and I we want to encourage the viewer to really think about something like that that's in the back of their mind that they've just never got round to. And I think what we'll tease out of you is maybe your process, your specific process. I think we all have. When I wrote my first book, I mean, literally, when I wrote MindStore, the first thing we did was we went down to St Ives in Cornwall, and we had 2 weeks holiday. And what the deal was that in the morning, once we were up and my kids were really, really young at the time, normally we'd take them out in the morning, and I would write, and I would just get this stuff out, the idea of the course, and then the afternoon was family time, so the next morning the same ritual, and over the 2 weeks the whole course was written. Then I went back to St Ives to write the book with the same process. So I think having the process is important. But I love the fact that you did the 4 o'clock in the morning thing, because Paula Yates had a big inspiration for me when I heard her being interviewed about the very same thing, about how she got round to writing I think she's published 24 books. I mean, the woman was prolific.
Wow.
And and if you remember, those who remember her, she was on the Big Breakfast TV programme in Channel 4 way back when that was huge. And she got up at 4, she wrote for an hour, just dumped it out, and then she would get ready at 5 to drive in, to go into the studio to be ready for the 7 o'clock broadcast. And she did it for weeks and weeks and weeks till she got the books out. And I think it's having that discipline. But I guess this is the powerful thing about it for all of us. You not only had the discipline, but you were driven by your why. Would you agree? The why you had to do it was what drove you.
Absolutely. My huge why was to keep my promise to my dad.
Yeah.
And Real Gone Kid is dedicated to my dad.
Yes. And that's the name of your
100%
book.
all the way.
That's
Real Gone Kid.
Yeah.
And it's under my author name, Kathleen Fridriksson.
Yes.
But so it was a very proud moment when it was published. It was, I've kept my promise, and then send it out to the world and hopefully nobody thinks your way's ugly and some people like it. I'm delighted to say that, excuse me, so this is the book, Real Gone Kid.
It's a fantastic book, by the way.
Thank you. And it's a coming of age piece of fiction which is set in 1984 in a Lanarkshire steel town. And it's been well received by readers, which I'm delighted by. Readers have compared it to, if you're thinking about a film, like a reverse Billy Elliot meets Dirty Dancing.
Yes, I can see that.
Yeah, it's a women rising story with some romance, and obviously it's got like the fashions and the music of the 80s and a Spotify playlist that accompanies the book as well. So it's a real walk down memory lane. So lots of readers, particularly local readers, have welcomed it. But also, it's sold worldwide. It's sold in over 30 countries.
Fantastic.
And I get like messages and DMs from readers worldwide, and and they're just like, I really love this story, and I didn't know that it was like that then, and all of this. So a lot of them were kind of thanking me for the memories as well. So it's been phenomenal. It was also longlisted for the Cheshire Nobel Prize, Jack, as well. So
My goodness.
I was delighted with that.
Of course. Extraordinary. And
So that
extraordinary.
was, yeah. But then what we're going to talk about is the bit in the middle.
But
The promise to my dad, and then
the
how
finished
it's going.
article. I mean, the book is amazing, and we'll put the links below. But I'm interested in, because I guess all of us, when we're stepping out in these strange places in our lives, because we've never done it before, and you come from the kind of backgrounds we both come from, and you think, can I actually do this?
Yeah.
I mean,
Working class.
Am I good enough to be able to do this? And you at least did well in English. I mean, I failed. I did famously an English teacher that thought I would never get my O level. I did, and I got my higher. But she gave me a real hard time, that teacher. And funnily enough, many years later, I met her in the airport in Glasgow, and I went over to her and I said, I don't know if you remember me. And she didn't remember me. I said, oh, by the way, you told me this and that, but actually, I've got a best-selling book out at the moment. And she gave, to be fair, she gave me her address and I sent her a copy. But they've all got our wee stories. But I think what might be helpful for the person watching this and think, you know what, I think everybody's got a book in them, by the way. I think everybody
I agree.
has.
I agree.
Everybody's got a painting in them. Everybody's got a song in them. I really believe that, right?
Cool.
So the thing is, what I had to overcome, and I know you, is the self-doubt. Can you tell us a wee bit about that? Maybe using Delete That program. Did you ever use a bell jar? How did you go on with this, that early stage, and maybe in the middle of it when maybe you get bogged down a wee bit? Is it going to come again? Tell me a wee bit about that part of it, because it's a management of mind thing, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. So it's as we said earlier. So it's setting the goal, setting the intention, and preparing yourself before you take the first step. So getting yourself into the mindset. Yeah. So you're getting yourself in the mindset and you're taking the first steps, and you've got your new laptop and you've got your Word document open and you've got an idea of who your characters are, all that. And then you start writing. And then it's a case of, can you say that though? I don't think you can say that. And then you're like, no, delete that program. I want this to happen. It's going to happen, So yeah, delete that program all the time. And then also because my why was so powerful as well, Jack, it was easier for me to bring down the bell jar as well. Yeah. When, if any, I mean, I can't say that there was any naysayers because I didn't tell anybody. Yeah,
that's the trick,
that I was doing it.
Yeah.
At the beginning. Yeah, I didn't tell anybody. And then I sort of, my husband knew, and then, my immediate family and a select few close friends, that was it. Otherwise, I was sort of working all these hours and writing all these hours, and nobody knew what I was doing. Yeah. So it was kind of safe for a wee while till I found my feet. And then still it was very, very scary, the rest of the journey. So definitely delete that program 100%. And also the bell jar when I was with anybody after I sort of started talking about writing the book. If anybody was doubting that it would be published, if it would be accepted, then the bell jar came down, because I knew there was a market for the book, because I wanted to read this book. I wanted to read a book about a young girl growing up in a sectarian steel town in Lanarkshire. It's a fictional steel town, but what was that like? And the music and the fashion and the hope, of your teens and the first loves and all that sort of stuff. And there are a few books set in Lanarkshire, but none that I could think of then, written by a female. I've come across a few more since then, but there was none at the time. No. And I think that's why it's been well received. So also, as part of my regular routine, is before I would open my eyes, and I said I worked in the morning. So before I opened my eyes, first thing I did was gratitude.
Brilliant.
To set the scene.
Brilliant.
To set the scene, set the tone, set the mood. Yeah. And then I'd go downstairs, and my kitchen table already had a flask of coffee on it. Yeah. It had my wee angel and candles and everything all round already. Say my prayer to the muse, and then I would just start. Pitch dark outside. Some mornings I've got no idea what I'm going to write. Sometimes I was typing. I have no idea what I'm going to write. And then my fingers just kept going, and next thing you know, the next scene came to me, and it was very much an evolution process.
Yeah, and can I draw
Sure.
you on that? Because I think, again, the
Yeah.
people might watch this, they get hope, and then they get subbed out again, but I don't have a story. I think the beautiful thing about what I think you're saying is you didn't know at the beginning, before you put the first word down, what was going to happen. You had maybe some ideas, but it wasn't specific, and you certainly didn't know the ending. Would
No.
that be a fair assumption?
That's absolutely 100% spot on, Jack. Yeah.
Wow.
I knew where it was going to take place.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to be some sort of story about a woman rising.
Yeah.
But I had no idea who the cast of characters were going to be.
Superb.
I had no idea how she was going to rise, and I had no idea of the ending. It just kept coming to me, as I was going into my media room and talking to my
Coaches.
giants, my coaches.
Yeah.
I would get inspiration.
I mean, one of the questions
when I was just walking around.
Yeah, I know. I'm just going to come to that, but one of the things about us is that we have the notion of the coaches or the giants, the whispers of giants type idea.
Yep.
Did you use specific coaches who were already authors by any chance, or did you just use your general team?
So whenever it was the book, it was specific authors.
Wow.
So for example, it was definitely Stephen King.
Nice.
I love his book on writing.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
a good craft book.
Yeah.
So Stephen King, J.K. Rowling's in there. I know she's come under fire recently, but she was in there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember who else, but basically creative people.
Yes.
Who could help bring me the ideas and advise me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were my coaches. I think Tony Robbins was in there as well.
Good.
From a rah. Obviously,
Yeah.
you're part of it, Jack, because you're in MindStore. So
yes, of course. Thank you. But I think the bit that's amazing is there's a few things, but I think the fact that you trusted that I use this term source, that source would provide.
Yeah.
And the wonderful thing about the trust is it's only going to happen at the right time. I can't imagine characters were just jumping in at random. They seem to follow in at the right moment. They would appear in your consciousness. Or there was a coincidence walking down the street and you go, I could use her or him. Or I think, is that fair for me to assume that you just allowed it to be attracted to you?
Yeah. And then, when you also send out signs as well, like, am I doing the right thing?
Yeah.
Because we've, especially writing about sectarianism, it's quite, an emotive subject.
Yeah.
I could have stayed away from it. Many authors who write about that time just kind of glance on it but don't really talk about it. So I was asking for signs, and I remember, do you remember the Guardian journalist, a lady from Motherwell called Deborah Orr?
Yes.
She was she was a legend. She was a legend.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, please give me a sign that I'm doing the right thing. And then I saw on Twitter that her memoir was coming out. Unfortunately, she passed away with cancer before it was published.
Yes.
Her memoir was coming out called Motherwell.
Yeah.
And it's by her. And a security guard came running down the street in the dark to tell me about this woman. And she said, if you heard that, she's died and all this. It's like, no, I didn't. But then the word "or" kept appearing for me, ORR.
Yeah.
So I'd be like driving up to Scotland, and there'd be a car in front of me. You're kind of zoning out when you're driving. There's a car in front of me, and its registration plate ended in ORR. And I'm like, okay, I'm on the right path.
Yeah.
And then the next time I went to Scotland, I said, send me a sign. And then next thing you know, I was taking all these junctions and roundabouts, and I was reading all the number plates, and they weren't there. And I was like, Then I came to this junction, and next thing you know, a big white Arctic truck went past in big red letters, ORR. And I was like, wow. So things like that, just to kind of encourage you to say, yeah, you are on the right path, keep going.
I just love you for sharing that, because that's the magic. I say to people, you remember, be coming to a course, things are going to happen to you that otherwise would never have happened if you hadn't come through the door.
Yeah.
And it's that awareness of the so-called coincidence. We just attract them. And what's beautiful about it is that your consciousness is aware of them when they happen. That's the one. And for you to, and then you're searching for them even, and they show up even in that searching process, never mind the coincidence of just randomly appearing. So powerful. But can I take you, because one of the themes that I've loved about our interviews, and I know we've got more to do, is you're constantly getting out of comfort zones. It's so empowering. I hope it's empowering for people out there watching. But some people won't appreciate it, but those of us with a West of Scotland background will know that you get way out your comfort zone to tackle the sectarianism. And for some people, that they especially from abroad, they become, what's that? But at my time, your time, it was huge. I grew up in the new town. I grew up in the new town, Cumbernauld, and to be fair, most people were really cool. Most people were cool. But I mean, I did really well at school. I got my hires, and after fifth year, I was getting off. Thought, I'm going to take a start. I just want to go out and work. I didn't want to go to university. I wanted to go to work. I had a particular career I wanted to go for, and I left school and applied for it, because back then, believe it or not, there was jobs everywhere. I mean, everybody got a job. Went out, applied for all sorts of jobs, and every time I got in there, inevitably the question was asked, what school did you go to? And as soon as it was asked, you knew the game was over. But funnily enough, I ended up being in social work once I went back to school, and then I went to university to train and stuff. Catholics very often could get promotions in social work and get jobs, and the other side wouldn't necessarily get the same opportunities. That was bizarre. But so it ran on both sides. Right. But for you to you to trust yourself to do that, and in the book, doing it so really amazingly, with nothing but hope, it's just extraordinary. And I want to thank you for taking the risk, and I'm sure others in the West of Scotland, from both sides of the mad divide, will appreciate what you did there. So well done. I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, Real Gone Kid is written from the point of view of a Catholic schoolgirl.
Yes.
And her best friend is in the Orange Lodge.
Yes.
And there's Protestant and Catholic friends. So it's all about striking that balance and the addressing some of the concerns between the two different religions.
It's amazing
concerning
how you do
that, but also humour in it as well. There's some humour. Des Dillon is brilliant, isn't he? I'm no a Tim.
Yeah.
The one that Des Dillon wrote. He addresses it really well.
Yeah.
But so I just, I took a lot of courage from him as well to okay, I'm not a Billy, I'm a Tim. That's what he wrote.
Yeah.
So I took a lot of courage from what he wrote as well. And actually, it's been well received, by folks who are Catholic, who are Protestant or other religions. It's been really well received.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's really good.
Yeah.
But that was my biggest getting out my comfort zone, was addressing that issue.
But you've done it so remarkably well. It's brilliant, and I'm sure people are going to enjoy it once they get their hand on the book. And it provides such hope, as I've said already. But if we can go back a wee bit to their actual process, I mean, again, will be helpful for people thinking stuff that I'm going to do it now. I remember I was driving a car somewhere, and there was Radio Scotland or something, and it was an interview of a guy who was one of the writers in Coronation Street. I've never watched it, but I'm an EastEnders kind of guy. But so it turned out that he was explaining that his process was that he would get up in the morning, 10 o'clock, he would sit in front of presumably his typewriter or whatever it was, and he would just dump stuff for literally 2 hours, discipline himself to stop at 12, take the midday out, have his meal, go for a walk, maybe a nap or something. He wouldn't go back to it again until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Then between 3 and 5, listen to this bit, he edited the bit they'd done the day before. So there was a full 24 hours plus of processing in the subconscious, which he handed it over to, or if you like, source, hands it over to churn it all over, comes back with it with a fresh eye. He's already dumped the next days in the morning, and he's now back at the previous days, and that's when he did his editing. So did you have a kind of process like that, or were you the kind of person that dumped it all out over a few weeks or a few months, then started your editing. How did you go about that?
Right. Okay. So the way you've just described would be ideal. If you didn't have a full-time job.
Yes. Yes.
But certainly when I wrote the first book, my process was I would write something, and then sometimes I'd go back and review it, and then start editing it and changing words and changing sentences and checking, what number the bus was that went from wherever.
Yeah.
And that took a long time. It really slowed the process in retrospect. I've recognised that.
Yeah.
Because literally when you're writing or drawing or sewing or knitting, you're using the creative side of your brain.
Yeah.
It's the right side of your brain that you're using.
Yeah.
And when you're editing, you're using the left side, logical side. So what I was asking myself to do was to constantly switch between the two.
Yes.
And maybe that sort of interfered with the flow.
Yeah.
So what I've done for book 2 is I am just drafting the book. And I'm leaving, we put a big XX in the manuscript, so I do finds on XX to find where I've left myself a note, find out the name of that nightclub on the corner of whatever. Because I don't have time, I'm not going to get out my flow,
No.
Brilliant, so that's what I do. So I basically, I'm just creating, I'm just leaving the channel open just to create, and I'm not using the logical side of my brain.
Superb.
And when I was just on a writing retreat recently, and the freedom from that, just to write and then just keep writing and keep writing. And then on the plane back, I was reading some of it and I thought, actually, that's not bad at all. Whereas I thought I was going to go back. I mean, I'll still have to edit it, of course.
Of course.
But at least I've not lost time. I think it's important to channel what it is that's coming to you and get it down as quick as you can.
Wonderful.
And it's months and months and months, Jack. It's it's probably 6-8 months to draft.
You have to be kind to yourself to know it will take time, and everything's in its own time, isn't it? I think one of the, for those of us again, MindStore people and people maybe who want to become MindStore people, is we've got this amazing gift of 3 fingers and tip of the tongue trigger, so that we can get ourselves in an alpha state and then start to write. And you're right. Then you're actually going to be in the level of consciousness where your right brain's flowing. You've maybe pre-programmed before you start with your coaches. You're invited certain coaches to merge, and you go, and it starts to come out. And so how did you go on when you did all that, and yet the page was blank, and there was something not you weren't writing it, or you weren't typing, or you weren't audibly doing it? How did you go over those blips? Because they happen, don't they?
They do. So sometimes you get to a scene. I mean, in the middle of the book, it's called the muddy middle.
Yes.
A lot of people know how the book begins, how it ends, and they don't really know what happens in the middle. So I was kind of working towards the middle. When I got there, and I was kind of like, right, okay, what happens next? I would think, okay, I don't know what happens next, but then I would know other scenes that I was going to write. So then I would skip forward and write those scenes.
Wow.
And then that would kickstart me, and I'd go back to the scene that I ended on and got stuck on, and then I'd know how to link the two, scenes together, or, whatever. That happened frequently.
My goodness.
The other thing I did, Jack, was give myself grace.
Lovely.
So if I couldn't, I mean, it never happened to me where I had no idea what I was going to write, because although maybe it wasn't the next scene, I always had the next scene ready. I always knew what I was going to write. So I was quite fortunate that way. And that was probably because of all the prep I'd done, with the MindStore coaches, the visualising, the dreaming about the book, thinking, right, this is how I want readers to feel when they're reading the book. And it achieved that. I mean, so many readers, when you read the reviews, said they laughed and they cried when they were reading it. Yeah. And that's an amazing feeling, to evoke that emotion in readers.
Yes.
But where I'm human, so maybe there was some bits where I was just like, oh, I know I want to write this scene, but maybe I'll just take a wee break. I would do something else.
Yeah.
And often the advice as well is to take your story in a different way. So maybe what you do is you read somebody else's book, you watch a show on Netflix, a movie. Yeah, and it kind of just kickstarts your juices, although you're not writing what they're showing you on the screen or on the page on this different book. it just kind of kickstarts you. Ideas start coming to you when you're not forcing them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I do it.
It's amazing.
No blank page though. And then as part of the writing process as well, so there's me writing, and then I for the first book, for Real Gone Kid, I had 2 critique partners. One was in San Diego,
Nice.
and she absolutely loved the story, even though it's set in the west coast of Scotland in the 80s. And also another lady who really enjoyed the story as well, is based in Yorkshire. They had 2 different styles of critiquing, in terms of challenging me and saying, would the characters say that? And it was good because I wasn't sharing it with anybody else. And sometimes they need to point out obvious stuff. Like, for example, at one point, my character's going off to a U2 gig, and there's a minibus coming. She's standing with her friends at the bus stop, and she gets on the minibus, and they're all really happy they're going to be at this U2 gig. So my character gets on, gets to the Barrowlands, and when I'm reading it a few drafts later, I realised that I'd left her friends at the bus stop and they should have been on the minibus. Wee things like that, where, sorry, I missed that, or sometimes a character's eye colour changes as well. I've had that. Not for me, but in, really famous books, on page 18 they were brown, and by page 22 they were blue, and I double checked, and this is a best-selling book, and I was like, wow, somebody never spotted that. So critique partners, and then also when I was happy that it was ready to be read by trusted people called beta readers, then I went out to my beta readers, and again they gave me feedback, because feedback's important, Jack. You're not just a one woman show.
You can't be.
You're receiving stuff, but you have to just sense check stuff. So that was really, really valuable as well before I went to print. It was fantastic. And then talking about serendipity as well, I needed a proofreader for the book, so I got a professional editor, professional book cover designer, professional formatter, and I needed somebody to professionally proof it. Because although I'm really good at English, after reading it 50 million times, you start not seeing the full stops that are missing, or something like that. And it was like, but all the proofreaders are like down south, and some of this is written in Scots vernacular, and they won't get, like, aye, that will be scoosh, and phrases like that we use, and they'd be like, what was scoosh? And things like that. So I really need a proofreader that's from around this area, but I don't know anybody from my local area. I put it out on Twitter.
Wow.
And it was actually Cheshire Novel Prize tweeted me about a lady called Lynn Walker. And would you believe that she comes from Coatbridge? I couldn't believe it. So they were recommending her. She works for the top 5, big publishers. And she's from Coatbridge. And she absolutely loved the story, because of course it's her hometown, her era as well. And obviously, she gave me stuff to do, which is obviously the point of her. So that was great. And then the lady who designed the cover for Real Gone Kid, it transpired she also designed the cover for Frank Bruno's autobiography. And Frank Bruno's in the book as well. So it was just, there were so many coincidences coming round. It was
extraordinary,
great.
isn't it? It's for people watching, it's the attraction of coincidence. I mean, in my own thing, I knew that I was kind of good at what I was doing. I originally started with a program called the Silva Method in Glasgow, and I built up people following me there and coming to the courses, and I'd have to bring over some big speakers from America and stuff, and pay for them and take the risk and so on. It was quite a journey, and got into a lot of debt because there was nobody coming to my courses really at the beginning. And it was a tough journey. And then one of the huge stars came over, and we did a gig in the Central Hotel, the famous Central Hotel. Where you've got your own stories in MindStore as well. And I'm in there, and I've put on this event, and in theory, the way it works is I should get part of the fees, and I'm not giving them. And I find out I'm not getting them, and they sort of break on the Sunday after Saturday, Sunday. It's a final break, and I find out you're not going to get anything, and I was like, what? And it just hit me like just right in the heart, a dagger. I thought, what?
Yeah.
And I just said to him, I tell you what, you'll never see me anywhere near you again. I'm off. But there was a lot of people who noticed me coming back from with the meeting that took place during their break. They'd been to the loo and all that kind of stuff. And I get pulled in and I sat at the back, but I was already out the door. That was me. I couldn't stand what had happened to me. But this old guy, Jim Bell, was famous in Coatbridge and obviously everywhere he was from. And Jim's looking over at me and he realised something was wrong. He could feel the shift in my energy and he just came over, sidled up and said, something's wrong with you, what's happened? And I was nearly going to cry. He was like a grandfather figure,
He
and
must have been gutted.
I was just, and basically, cut a long story short, he said, come on, let's get out of here, let's go for a pint. Went for a pint, spilled my beans, and he said to me, look, Jack, you're better than all of them. You can, if you go away and research, and it's interesting, I was saying there was no internet, go and research. Well, what do you do? How do you do that? Go to the library and maybe do the odd course and stuff. He said, promise, tell everybody who's on your, you didn't have a database back then, but on your list, just not email, but post a letter to all them, tell them you're going to produce a new course.
Sure.
Give them the date, 6 months from now, and you will do that. And then he supported me all that time. And then I did the first course. He was there. Then he invited me to his daughter's wedding. And by then I realised in order to get any credibility, I needed to write a book, but write a book. Did you do well at English sort of thing? And anyway, I go to the wedding, leaving the church, go in a car at random to go to the reception, and sitting in the car is Jim Bell's brother, who I didn't know, famous Eddie Bell, turned out to be the chairman of HarperCollins.
Wow.
So he asked me, so what do you do? And I said, there's probably a book in that. Tell you what, write a book and I'll publish it.
Wow.
I mean, how did that happen?
Like the top publisher.
Exactly.
Wow.
And he did. And then he got right in behind it. And then I was in London doing a gig. I'm walking down Oxford Street. A bus comes by and there's me on the side of the bus, promoting the book. I go into Watkins bookstore and I go in there and there's a life-size cutout of me. I was like, what's going on here? And all of
must have been surreal.
Exactly. All of it, coincidence, because of our intentions and because of our whys. I mean, I didn't write a book so that somehow or other I could become an author and get fame or something. I wrote it so that people could use what was in it. It's my way.
Absolutely.
And you're the same. It's just amazing. So when it got to the point when you're now ready to publish, and I can only imagine you're using your screens, your programming meetings, you're doing that whole discipline. Were you doing that, or but then you just so clear about it, you're definitely doing it, or did you still need to use the techniques?
Yeah. No, absolutely. So there's so many processes in producing the book. Right, there's the ideating it, and then there's the, creating it, the editing and the proofreading, and then it's the publishing. So so it was more a case of going into the media room and looking at my screens. So my sort of past history. Well, I've had stuff published, but not a book. No. And then what's happening now and what I want to happen in the future and all that. And then my coaches and doing all the stuff that we do without going into too much detail. Yes. 100%. So I began with traditional publishing, which is where you approach agents, to be represented by one of the big publishing houses, or a small publisher as well. I queried. That's what it's called when you send your synopsis in your 3 chapters. I queried about 12 agents, and this was just coming out the back of COVID. So this was like 2021, 22. Yeah. And 3 came back. So I got 3 full manuscript requests, which is kind of like getting the job interview after the application. Yeah. And one sort of fell away because she was on maternity leave. She ended up, being busy, which was fine. And the other 2, one of them wanted me to change the timeline to the current day. But Jack, you've read the book. The whole point of the book is the fact it's set in the 1980s at that time when we had, Simple Minds and Big Country and all these different bands and the fashions, like I didn't want to set it then. So, and then the other one was like, she was like a big fan. She was like, I really really love the story. Both of them loved the story, she says, but she was struggling they needed oven-ready books.
Yeah.
And the oven-ready books had to fit into niches, easy to understand niches like, cozy crime, romance, horror, fantasy, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And a book set in the 1980s in a sectarian steel town in Scotland doesn't really fit the bill. The last one in particular she was just like, I have no doubt that you're going to find an agent. Unfortunately, because it doesn't fit my portfolio at the minute. I was like, yeah, no problems. So then, Jack, I was thinking, okay, so I could wait, keep querying. And obviously you get sometimes if you're lucky, you get a rejection email and sometimes you just don't hear anything. So I could keep querying and maybe I'll secure an agent in 6 months, 9 months, a year, maybe. And then in traditional publishing, it takes another 2 years because they have to schedule it in, in a publishing schedule.
Yeah.
18 months, 2 years for it to appear, something like 3-4 years. And there were some health challenges for myself presenting. And I was desperate to keep my promise to my dad. And I thought, I know there's a market for this book. The women that grew up in the 80s, wherever they're from,
Aye.
I know that there's a market for this group. So I'm going to go ahead and self-publish.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I then was using my coaches like mad. So, like, okay, so what's the next stage? What do I do now? And how do I do that? And, the courses, YouTube, suddenly there was a course on, your publishing choices and stuff like that. So I really, really researched how to do it to find the right sort of choices for me.
Yeah.
And I did a 6-week intensive self-publishing course with a lady in Texas.
Super.
But if anybody wants it, I can give them it. It was absolutely, it was brilliant. It was a roadmap on how to self-publish.
Fantastic.
So that's how I did it. I went out and my why was so strong. My goal was there. My intention was there. So I just kept saying, right, what's the next step? What's the right next step? And I just kept taking it a step at a time.
Brilliant.
If I'd thought about how much work it was at the beginning when I was sat there on the 19th of October 2019, it was dark outside, I would never have started probably.
No,
I would have, because I was still going to do it.
You had a why.
But it's exactly like you say, Jack. You take your first step on the journey, the next one, and then literally the people, the places and the opportunities turn up as you're, visualising it, setting deleting any negative thoughts, using your bell jar, talking to your coaches, so 100%. So when I was self-publishing, that was massive. That was coming out my comfort zone hugely because, I'm doing this, I'm learning this, I'm self-teaching myself this. What if I make a mistake? Yeah. What if I make a mistake? What if I send it out to publish and it's the wrong cover, or, there's loads of spelling mistakes, it's the wrong, whatever inside, or, all that stuff. And then I was just like, but when it was ready, and they say when you can't look at it anymore, when you're scunner looking at it, that's when it's ready to publish.
Yeah.
If you can still look at it, then it still needs to be edited, apparently. So when I was scunner, I was like, I'm going to get this out for Christmas. And I learned all the back end of Amazon and the other store retailers so that it would be available in, Waterstones and the library. It was really important it was available in the library because I lived in the library when I was a kid. So I learned all that back end stuff. And then when I went to press publish on Amazon, and I just went with the ebook first, just to kind of dip my toe in the water. And I pressed publish, and then nothing happened. And I was just like, whoa, the world didn't end and all of that. And then I sort of told my family, and they were like, well, tell people about it, because I hadn't told anybody, outside my group.
Yeah.
And then I started to, put it on Facebook and all that. And then the sales just went like that,
It's fantastic.
And people were really excited to read it. So it was phenomenal. So that was my publishing process, which is a bit different to traditional.
Yeah.
The beauty of self-publishing is I've got full control.
Yeah.
But I don't have the kudos of being traditionally published.
Yeah.
But it suited what I needed.
Yeah. Well, listen, this has been amazing again talking to you. It's such a privilege. I think that I would say this too, because something you threw in there, and I just want to reinforce something. I found the book to be really, really entertaining. as a man. Because
Oh,
you
good.
did mention you thought maybe your market was women, but I think actually
Yeah.
for other guys who lived through that era, or me, I was maybe a generate slightly before that, 10 years or so before that, or whatever.
Yeah.
The thing is, I identified with, it gave me an insight of understanding when my girlfriends or the girls I knew when I was going through that age
Yeah.
group early on in the book,
Yeah.
they must have been I was beginning to understand it from their point of view, and I found it really amazing. I felt part of it as a reader, even though it
Oh,
was.
that's good.
So I think for any men, I think you're going to love this book. I think it's fantastic. It gives you such
Yeah.
insights. And obviously for the women, it must be amazing, especially if you come from the west of Scotland. But again, so any final comments or anything you'd like to say to people reading this, maybe just to encourage them to step out of their own comfort zones before we close off?
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever your project is. So mine was to write and publish a book. I'm now on the second book, which is amazing. But whatever your individual project is, and like Jack said earlier, I mean, I always think of creative stuff because that's what sort of sets me on fire. But it's the, if it's the book, if it's the poetry, if it's the music, if it's the painting and drawing, pottery, designing your home, whatever it is, just start it. Make a start, make a plan, make a start. Yeah. And as you know, Jack, especially because your goal setting videos are up on YouTube, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're fantastic to just think what it is that you want.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not going to be your next job or something like that, but it could be, like a side gig, something that brings you joy.
Yeah.
That you'd like to do. 100%. Give it a go. What's the right next step? Send the email, research.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I love the fact you use the word joy there just to close off, but I think that
absolutely.
Some people's gift isn't what they're doing in their career. And it can be, of course, and people who are using their career by applying their gift and so on. It's just fantastic. So some people have got a hidden gift that only by doing what you've been describing here brings that to the fore. And then people do experience joy and abundance. So, but folks, I'm going to have to bring this to a close. But this is something I want you to really hear. If you thought that was getting out your comfort zone, wait till you watch the third interview, which is just mind-blowing. And I can't wait to do that with Kathleen. So Kathleen, thanks again. I'm sure everybody just wants to give you a big thumbs up and thank you. Just amazing. Wonderful.
Oh, my pleasure, Jack. My pleasure.
Okay, folks, we'll see you another time. Bye now. Bye-bye. Thanks, Kathleen. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.